I've always believed that the bonds we form in our youth were unbreakable, sacred connections that time and distance could never erode. Back in our university days, our little circle of friends was a tight-knit clan, and I was at the heart of it all. It seemed like nothing could ever tear us apart. We laughed together, cried together, and built dreams side by side. I never imagined that hidden behind our warm smiles and shared memories was a secret that would eventually unravel the very fabric of my life. I still remember those carefree nights spent debating everything from politics to our wildest fantasies. We were so sure that nothing in our lives could ever be more complicated than those youthful arguments. Yet life, with its uncanny ability to surprise, had plans far more intricate than any of us could foresee. There was Rebecca, my steadfast partner through it all. When we first met, she carried a spark that could light up the darkest corners of any room. We fell in love naturally, like two people destined to be together. But as I look back now, I see that there was more to her story than I ever suspected. There were moments, fleeting, almost imperceptible, when the past seemed to whisper its presence. At the time, I brushed them off as remnants of youthful uncertainty, nothing more than ghost echoes of earlier days. Then there was Daniel, one of our closest friends, whose presence in our lives was both comforting and, unbeknownst to me, profoundly complicated. Long before I ever thought about marriage or long-term commitment, Rebecca had once dated Daniel. I only caught wind of that detail much later, and even then, it seemed like an echo from a distant time, a mere blip in our shared history. What I didn't know, and what none of us had ever truly confronted, was the tangled web that had been spun from that past. Daniel, who had been a trusted friend for years, ended up marrying Catherine when she became pregnant, a twist of fate that none of us had ever anticipated. For nearly 25 years, the implications of that decision lay dormant beneath the surface of our lives. It was as if the truth was locked away in a dusty attic, hidden behind memories and carefully constructed narratives. I was oblivious to the storm that was quietly gathering momentum around me, and it was all camouflaged by the ordinary rhythm of our lives. Looking back, it's almost surreal how seamlessly that secret integrated into our shared history. I often wonder if there were subtle hints I missed, the lingering looks, the brief pauses when certain names were mentioned. At the time, I thought they were nothing more than coincidences or the quirks of long-standing friendships. It never occurred to me that the very foundation of our trust and camaraderie was built on a delicate balance of unspoken truths and half-remembered pasts. In the haze of those early years, love and friendship were simple, almost naive concepts. Yet, as the years went by, the layers of our past began to accumulate like sediment in a long-forgotten riverbed. The revelation of that hidden love triangle, a connection that spanned almost a quarter of a century, would later force me to confront questions about loyalty, trust, and the true nature of our relationships. Even now, I can't help but marvel at how life can conceal such pivotal truths in plain sight. I didn't know it then, but that secret was the quiet architect of many of our choices. It lay in wait, a dormant force ready to reshape everything when the time was right. And as I sit here reflecting on those days, I realize that our seemingly perfect circle was never as simple as it appeared. Every laugh, every tear was tinged with the possibility of revelation, a revelation that would come to redefine everything I thought I knew about love, friendship, and the intricate tapestry of our intertwined lives. I never expected that a single night could shatter everything I thought I knew about love and loyalty. It was a few months after Catherine's passing, a quiet, relentless illness that had slowly taken her away, when everything began to unravel. I still recall the subdued gravity in Rebecca's eyes when she sat me down in our familiar, sunlit living room. The air was thick with unspoken words, and I sensed that nothing would ever be the same after this conversation. Rebecca took a deep breath before revealing the truth that had been hidden away for so many years. She told me that on the night after Catherine's death, Daniel had confessed something that sent shockwaves through her carefully constructed world. He admitted that his love for her had never truly faded, that beneath the facade of friendship and shared memories, there was an undercurrent of passion he had harbored all along. I listened, numb, as Rebecca described his trembling words and the raw vulnerability in his eyes. In that moment, the ghosts of our past, those half-forgotten secrets of college days and long-dormant emotions, seemed to come alive with a vengeance. But the confession was only the beginning. As the evening deepened, Rebecca unveiled a plan so audacious, so utterly beyond anything I could have imagined, that I felt the ground give way beneath me. She proposed a deal, a proposition that blurred the lines of fidelity, love, and commitment. Rebecca suggested that she would share her life between Daniel and me, dividing her time in a way that she claimed would honor the complexities of our intertwined pasts and present desires. According to her plan, she would spend 3 weeks with me and 2 with Daniel. The proposal, presented with a disarming calmness, left me reeling with disbelief. I remember the precise moment when it all became too much. I sat there, my heart pounding as I struggled to comprehend the sheer audacity of the suggestion. How could the woman I had built a life with, the person I had believed was my partner, treat our relationship as if it were negotiable? The idea of sharing her, of sharing our love, our memories, and everything in between was inconceivable. It wasn't just a challenge to my masculinity or an affront to my sense of self-respect. It was a betrayal of every promise we'd ever made to one another. In that moment, my mind raced with questions. Had I been living a lie all these years? Was the foundation of our marriage built on something so fragile that it could be so easily partitioned between 2 people? And most hauntingly, did Rebecca's proposal stem from a desire to recapture something lost, a need to relive memories of the past that were too painful to let go? I tried to understand her perspective, to fathom the depths of her emotions. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like I was drowning in a sea of uncertainty and betrayal. As the night wore on, the conversation turned even darker. I learned that Rebecca, despite her calm exterior, was battling her own demons. She admitted that the years following Catherine's death had been a blur of loneliness and regret, and that Daniel's confession, though shocking, had ignited feelings in her that she had long tried to suppress. She explained that her proposal was not born out of a desire to hurt me, but rather as a desperate attempt to reconcile her past with her present. Yet, no matter how rational her words tried to sound, the sting of betrayal was too raw to ignore. I felt a deep, almost physical shock, like a sudden, searing pain that cut through the very core of my being. I couldn't see any middle ground in this twisted proposal. The thought of dividing her love, of negotiating the most intimate aspects of our shared life like a business deal, was abhorrent. My reaction was immediate and unyielding. I flatly refused her proposal. There was no room for compromise when it came to something so sacred as our bond. The next steps were almost as inevitable as the confession itself. Unable to reconcile the woman I loved with the person who was now proposing such an unimaginable arrangement, I made the hardest decision of my life. I filed for divorce, severing the ties that had once bound us together so tightly. In the chaos of that emotional upheaval, there was one small victory, a parting gift of sorts. I managed to secure the house, a sprawling $1.2 million sanctuary that had once been a symbol of our shared dreams and future plans. Now, it stood as a bittersweet monument to what had been lost. As I packed my belongings and prepared to leave the life I had known, I couldn't help but reflect on the twisted irony of it all. Here I was, betrayed by the woman I loved, a betrayal that had been brewing in the shadows for years, hidden behind a facade of normalcy and everyday routines. And yet, amid the wreckage of shattered promises and broken hearts, there was an undeniable truth. Sometimes, the most painful revelations are the ones that force us to confront our own deepest vulnerabilities. Even now, as I piece together the fragments of my life, I can't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a journey that would redefine everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the complex dance of human relationships. After Rebecca moved in with Daniel almost as quickly as the storm had broken, I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. It was as if, in a single, cold moment, everything I had built was swept away by the tide of betrayal. I stood alone in our once shared home, feeling an emptiness so profound that even the walls seemed to echo with the memories of happier times. The silence was unbearable, a constant reminder of what had been lost. In the midst of this chaos, my daughter Haley, now 29, was my steadfast pillar. I watched her struggle with a mix of anger and hurt as she processed her mother's actions. Haley had always been fiercely independent, and I admired the way she refused to let her loyalty be swayed by sentimentality. When she learned of Rebecca's decision to throw caution in our family, aside for Daniel, she didn't hesitate to side with me. Her outrage mirrored my own, and in her eyes, I found a glimmer of hope, a promise that maybe, together, we could rebuild from the ruins of our past. Determined to start afresh, I made the bold decision to leave behind the memories that haunted every corner of our old home. I packed a few belongings and moved to a new area about 90 miles away, a distance that felt both physically and emotionally liberating. In this unfamiliar territory, every street corner held the promise of new beginnings, and every friendly smile was a small victory against the loneliness that had become all too familiar. It wasn't long before I encountered a vibrant tapestry of new people, each with their own stories of loss and redemption. Among them was Lauren, a woman whose presence felt like a breath of fresh air amid the stifling air of my recent past. Lauren's story was as painful as it was extraordinary. She had survived the ultimate betrayal, not by a lover, but by the man she had once trusted with her heart. Her husband had left her for a series of affairs, entangling himself with 3 mistresses and fathering an illegitimate child, leaving Lauren with a broken heart and a shattered sense of self. Our first encounter was unremarkable, a chance meeting at a local coffee shop where the aroma of roasted beans mingled with the crisp morning air. Yet, as we exchanged hesitant smiles and polite conversation, I sensed an unspoken understanding between us. It was as if we were both survivors, silently acknowledging the wounds that we bore and the scars that told the stories of our past betrayals. In Lauren, I saw a mirror of my own pain and resilience. She had built her life back from the ground up, her strength forged in the crucible of her experiences. As our friendship deepened, we began to share more than just casual pleasantries. Over long walks in the park and late-night conversations that stretched into the early hours of the morning, Lauren revealed fragments of her past, how her husband's infidelities had not only undermined her trust, but had also forced her to question her own self-worth. Yet, in the midst of her sorrow, there was a spark of defiance, a determination to reclaim her identity. I found solace in her words, and in a strange twist of fate, it felt as if our shared pain was weaving the threads of a new tapestry, a future where we could redefine what love and trust meant on our own terms. Our connection wasn't without its complications. I couldn't help but wonder if our meeting was a mere coincidence or if fate had orchestrated this encounter to teach me that life, no matter how harsh, always had room for unexpected miracles. Every day, I marveled at how 2 people, each scarred by betrayal, could find in each other the strength to rise again. There were moments when I questioned whether I was ready to open my heart once more, but Lauren's unwavering courage in the face of her own demons slowly chipped away at my defenses. In the midst of my new life, I also grappled with the lingering questions about my past. What did it mean to start over when the ghosts of old betrayals still whispered in the back of my mind? The answer, I slowly realized, was not in the erasure of those memories, but in the acceptance of them. Lauren's presence reminded me that every scar was a testament to survival, a story of resilience that could pave the way for a brighter future. Yet, as comforting as our budding relationship was, there was an undercurrent of tension, a silent acknowledgement that the journey toward healing was fraught with unpredictability. Life, with its relentless twists, had a way of reminding us that even in our moments of newfound happiness, the shadows of the past could resurface when least expected. But for the first time in a long while, I dared to hope that the future might hold something different, something that wasn't defined by betrayal or loss, but by the promise of new beginnings and the courage to embrace them. I still remember the day I helped Lauren fix her car as if it were etched into my memory. It was a chilly Saturday morning when I found her standing on the side of the road, frustration written all over her face as she tried to coax her sputtering car back to life. I parked my truck a few feet away, and before I knew it, we were elbow deep in grease and car parts, trying to diagnose the problem. The repair bill ended up being a staggering $850, a sum that would have strained anyone's budget. But I didn't hesitate for a second. I rolled up my sleeves and offered to help, not because I expected anything in return, but because I saw in Lauren a kindred spirit, someone who had been scarred by betrayal and was slowly piecing herself back together. Working side by side in that modest, cluttered garage was more than just a car repair session. It was the beginning of a genuine connection. There were no pretenses or calculated gestures, just two wounded souls finding solace in each other's company. I remember how she smiled gratefully as I handed her the wrench, her eyes lighting up with a mixture of relief and something else. Hope, perhaps, or the anticipation of a new start. I never asked her to pay a cent, and in that moment, it felt like the simplest act of kindness could pave the way for something extraordinary. In the weeks that followed, our chance encounter transformed into a steady rhythm of communication. We'd text about the little absurdities of our day, share our favorite songs, and laugh at memories that were both painful and oddly endearing. It wasn't long before those brief exchanges grew into long, late-night phone calls. With every conversation, I found a piece of myself reawakening, a feeling of happiness I hadn't experienced in years. It was as if Lauren's presence slowly healed the wounds of the past, replacing bitterness with a gentle, burgeoning hope. After about 10 months of tentative courtship, we finally decided to take the plunge and make it official. There was an unspoken understanding between us that what we shared was real, something that defied the scars of our past relationships. We didn't need grand gestures or overly romantic proclamations. Instead, we built our connection on trust, mutual respect, and a shared commitment to moving forward. I can't recall the exact moment when I realized I was truly happy again, but it was in the quiet moments, the soft laughter over breakfast, the simple comfort of a shared silence, that the truth of our growing bond became undeniable. Our journey wasn't a whirlwind romance by any means. It was steady, measured, and at times downright fragile. We both carried baggage from past betrayals, and there were moments when old insecurities threatened to cast shadows on our newfound light. Yet with every challenge, we learned to lean on each other, forging a deeper understanding of what it meant to love and be loved despite everything. I cherish the fact that with Lauren, every day felt like a fresh start, an opportunity to redefine what happiness could be. A year and 3 months after we officially began dating, Lauren made the decision to move in with me. I still remember the day she crossed the threshold of my new home, a place that had once represented a haven after a painful divorce, but now felt truly complete with her presence. It wasn't just the merging of two households. It was the merging of our lives, our histories, and our hopes for the future. We spent that day unpacking not only boxes filled with personal mementos, but also the layers of trust and vulnerability that had taken so long to build. Moving in together wasn't without its challenges. There were nights when we'd argue over the smallest things, where to place a photograph, the temperature of the room, or how to best organize our shared space. But each disagreement was a reminder that we were, in fact, learning how to navigate the intricacies of a relationship that had been tempered by pain and healed with time. Every resolved conflict, every shared smile after a heated discussion, reaffirmed our commitment to forging a path that was uniquely ours. Looking back now, I see that the simple act of fixing a car was the spark that ignited a flame I hadn't thought possible. Lauren and I both came into each other's lives bearing scars and doubts, yet we managed to build something that felt remarkably genuine, a testament to the resilience of the human heart. In a world that had once seemed determined to break us, we found a way to heal, grow, and ultimately love again. Our story is far from perfect. It's woven with moments of uncertainty and vulnerability, a mosaic of past mistakes and future promises. But every day, as I wake up beside her or share a quiet moment over coffee, I'm reminded that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings can lead to the most profound endings. And as we continue to build our lives together, I'm slowly learning that happiness isn't about erasing the past. It's about embracing it and using its lessons to craft a brighter, more authentic future. Our wedding day wasn't the extravagant affair you might see splashed across glossy magazines. Instead, it was a humble, heartfelt ceremony, a simple celebration of our decision to join our lives together, and it cost us just $3,500. I remember standing there, looking into Lauren's eyes, and feeling that our love was enough to sustain us, without the need for lavish decorations or a crowded guest list. The simplicity of our vows and the quiet sincerity of our promises somehow made that day even more profound. There was no pretense, no overblown pomp, just two souls coming together, determined to support each other through whatever life had in store. After the ceremony, we traded our modest celebration for an adventure that promised memories we'd treasure for a lifetime. We embarked on a honeymoon to Greece, a land steeped in history, myth, and breathtaking beauty. The trip cost us a cool $18,000, a significant investment in experiences rather than possessions. Greece was a revelation. We strolled hand in hand through ancient ruins, ate the most amazing meals by the sparkling blue sea, and spent quiet evenings watching sunsets that set the sky ablaze with color. Every moment felt like a step into a new chapter of our lives, one filled with the promise of endless possibilities and the thrill of exploration. It was during these trips, amid the ancient columns and sunlit islands, that I began to truly appreciate how far we'd come. From the dark aftermath of past betrayals to this moment of unbridled hope and joy. Just when I thought our lives couldn't get any more promising, life threw us a curveball that, in retrospect, turned out to be the greatest gift of all. Not long after returning from Greece, Lauren discovered she was pregnant. I remember the moment like it was yesterday. A quiet morning, the soft light filtering through our kitchen window, and Lauren sitting across from me with a trembling smile, her eyes shining with a mixture of wonder and apprehension. In that instant, all the uncertainties and pains of our past seemed to melt away. The news of our baby transformed everything. It wasn't just the prospect of expanding our family. It was a rebirth of hope, a tangible reminder that love, even after all the heartbreaks and betrayals, could create something new and beautiful. Pregnancy brought with it its own set of challenges and joys. There were days when Lauren's laughter filled our home, and moments when the sheer weight of our newfound responsibilities hit us unexpectedly. We spent long evenings planning, dreaming about the future, and wondering what kind of parents we would be. Every kick felt like a tiny miracle, a reminder that life could be both unpredictable and infinitely wonderful. In those moments, I often found myself reflecting on the winding path that had led us here, from the painful partings and broken promises of the past to the humble wedding, the unforgettable honeymoon, and now the promise of a new life growing within Lauren. The arrival of our baby symbolized so much more than just the continuation of our bloodline. It was the culmination of all the trials we'd endured, a quiet but powerful statement that even in the midst of life's chaos, love could rebuild and transform. As we prepared for this new chapter, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Every hardship, every tear shed along the way, seemed to have paved the way for this moment of pure, unadulterated joy. Lauren's strength, her vulnerability, and the unwavering support we found in each other made me believe that our future, however uncertain it might be, was bright and filled with endless potential. Looking back, our journey from a simple wedding and an adventurous honeymoon to the life-changing news of pregnancy feels almost surreal. It's as if the universe, in its infinite wisdom, was gently nudging us toward redemption and renewal. We might not have had the flashiest celebration or the most expensive wedding, but what we shared was far richer, a love that had been tempered by life's harshest lessons, and now, with the prospect of a new life, was ready to bloom once again. Every day now is imbued with a new kind of magic. The anticipation of tiny footsteps, the promise of laughter and new memories, and the deep, abiding hope that the best chapters of our lives are yet to be written. And as I watched Lauren cradle her growing belly and smile at the future with a glimmer of hope in her eyes, I know that every sacrifice, every difficult choice was worth it. Our story, with all its twists and turns, has led us here to the beautiful, unpredictable miracle of new life. The call came late at night, an urgent ringing that shattered the quiet stillness of our home. I answered groggily, but the moment I heard Haley's trembling voice on the other end, I was fully awake. It was panic, grief, and something else, shock. I could barely process her words as she choked out what had happened. Rebecca and Daniel had been in a car accident. They were speeding, going 85 miles per hour on a rain-slicked highway when Daniel lost control. The car flipped, skidding violently before crashing into the median. Daniel died on the spot. Rebecca, by some cruel twist of fate, survived. I sat there in silence, gripping the phone as the weight of the news pressed down on me. A part of me should have felt vindicated. This was the man who had taken my wife from me, the man who had turned my life upside down with his confession, the man she had chosen over me. And yet, all I felt was an overwhelming sense of exhaustion. There was no satisfaction in tragedy, no triumph in loss. At the end of the day, Rebecca was still the mother of my child, and no matter how much history lay between us, she was now alone, broken, and suffering. Lauren was the first to place a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. "You should go," she said softly. There was no jealousy in her voice, no resentment, just understanding. She knew, perhaps better than anyone, that some wounds were too deep to be ignored. So I went. Rebecca was in the hospital when I arrived. The room smelled of antiseptic and stale air, and she looked smaller than I remembered, fragile in a way I had never seen before. Her face was pale, bruises forming across her arms, a bandage wrapped around her forehead. When she saw me standing at the door, her eyes filled with something that looked like regret, an emotion I had never once associated with her. We didn't speak at first. The silence stretched between us, heavy with all the things we had left unsaid over the years. Finally, she exhaled shakily and whispered, "Daniel's gone." I nodded. I didn't say I was sorry. It wasn't because I lacked sympathy. I just knew that nothing I said would change the reality of what had happened. Instead, I pulled up a chair beside her, letting the quiet settle between us. For the next few days, I was there, not as a husband, not as the man she had betrayed, but as a friend, as the father of her child. Haley visited often, her anger toward her mother momentarily replaced by concern. We navigated the situation with careful steps, understanding that while the wounds of the past hadn't disappeared, they no longer mattered in the face of such devastation. But grief wasn't the only thing Rebecca had to face. In the aftermath of Daniel's death, her entire world crumbled. Daniel had been the primary earner, and without him, she was left with nothing. She had no job, no money, and nowhere to live. The home they shared was mortgaged beyond her means, and she was drowning in debts she hadn't even known existed. The woman who had once stood so confidently before me, offering to split her love between two men, was now utterly lost. Despite everything, I couldn't just walk away. Some part of me still remembered the woman I had once loved, the woman who had been my partner for decades before everything fell apart. More than that, I knew that Haley, no matter how betrayed she had felt by her mother's choices, would never forgive me if I let Rebecca fall apart completely. So I helped, not out of obligation, not out of some lingering attachment, but because I could. I found her a job, nothing extravagant, just something stable enough to get her back on her feet. I connected her with a real estate agent who helped her find a modest home, a far cry from the luxury she had once lived in, but still comfortable, a $320,000 house in a quiet neighborhood, something she could afford with time and effort. She didn't thank me, not directly, but there was a look in her eyes when I handed her the keys to her new home that said more than words ever could. A quiet acceptance, an understanding that despite everything, I had chosen not to leave her in the wreckage of her mistakes. And then I walked away. My life wasn't tied to Rebecca anymore. My home was with Lauren, with the family we were building. But some part of me knew that this chapter needed to be closed properly. There were no perfect endings, no justice that made the past hurt less. But at least now, we could all move forward, each of us carrying the lessons of our pasts into the uncertain promise of the future. Years passed, and life moved forward in ways I never could have imagined. The pain, the betrayals, the heartbreak, it all became part of the past, woven into the fabric of my history, but no longer defining my present. What had once been wounds are now just scars, reminders of a life lived fully, with all its messy, unexpected turns. The biggest surprise came in the form of Haley and Mia. Despite their complicated connection, half-sisters born from a tangled web of relationships, they became inseparable. Over time, their bond grew into something that transcended the chaos of their origins. When they both found love and decided to get married, they asked me to walk them down the aisle. I was stunned. I had expected to be there for Haley, of course, but Mia, the daughter of the man who had upended my life? And yet, when I looked at her, I didn't see Daniel anymore. I saw a young woman who had become part of my family in an unexplainable, undeniable way. That day, as I stood between them, my arms linked with theirs, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, pure, unfiltered peace. It didn't matter how we had all gotten here. What mattered was that we had made it. I walked them down the aisle with pride, knowing that despite the chaos that had once surrounded us, love had won in the end. But the biggest victory wasn't just in their happiness. It was in the life Lauren and I built together. After everything we had been through, we created something neither of us thought was possible, a strong, loving family. 5 kids filled our home with laughter, chaos, and the kind of love that healed even the deepest wounds. We weren't a perfect family, but we were ours, and that was enough. Lauren and I had built something from the ashes of our past, something neither of us had thought possible after being betrayed so completely. We weren't just survivors. We were builders, architects of a future that was ours alone. And as life continued, even Rebecca found her own second chance. After years of struggling to rebuild, she found love again, this time with her boss, a man who treated her with the kind of care and respect that she had once overlooked. They got married in a small ceremony, nothing extravagant, but suited her. For the first time in a long time, she looked truly happy. And despite everything, I was happy for her too. Lauren and I eventually decided to give our family the home it deserved. We bought a sprawling estate for $2.5 million, a place where our children could grow up surrounded by nature, space, and the kind of stability we had both craved for so long. It was more than just a house. It was a testament to everything we had built together, to the resilience that had carried us through even the darkest times. As I sat on the porch of our new home, watching Lauren play with the kids in the yard, I realized something. This was my happy ending. Not the one I had planned, not the one I had expected, but the one that felt right. Life had taken me on a journey I never could have predicted, through heartbreak and betrayal, through loss and renewal. And yet here I was, surrounded by love, by laughter, by family. In the end, the past didn't define me. The choices I made, the love I nurtured, and the people I held close, those are the things that mattered. And as the sun set over our home, with the echoes of laughter filling the air, I knew that no matter what had come before, I had found my way to where I was always meant to be.